Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. For those of you who aren't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. But on to the point. I have had probably a dozen people link me this one video. In fact, I got like 8 private messages yesterday saying, Jason, look at this video Greg Doucette did. Please check it out. What's all this bro science? He's talking about size equals strength not being true. He's saying bodybuilding is harder than powerlifting. What do you think about all that? Well, I'm going to give my opinion on it. And I want you guys to remember I am personally not a doctor, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. And here's my take. You guys know I hold a generally favorable view of Greg. I'm going to disagree with a lot of things he said in this video. It's just flat bro science, provably false statements. His own anecdote, his personal experience. But what I will say with that, I don't think you can't always discount someone like Greg's personal experience. He does coach a lot of people. He's been successful in multiple competitive endeavors. The guy's jacked. The guy is strong. Right? He has a lot of experience. And so with someone like Greg, you can't fully take away from his anecdote. You can't take away from that because the guy has a legitimate, ridiculous amount of good experience. Right? You can't take that away from him. But by that same token, I think with some of it, people need to remember a couple of points. When he's talking about, size versus strength, first of all, let's go back to the other point. Greg was a world-class level power lifter in the past. All right? He built a whole heck of a lot of his size, if not all of his size, as a power lifter while using hefty amounts of anabolics. Admitted he used bunches of tren and stuff. So you've got to keep that in perspective, guys. In fact, looking back, objectively speaking, I can't say that he's actually bigger now as a bodybuilder in terms of total lean body mass. Is he bigger than he was as a power lifter? I don't know that he was. Now, he'll make this statement, and you know what? His fans and everyone else will probably say, yeah, but we think he looks better. You guys will say he looks better. Let's rephrase that. You think he looks better. That's not objective. That is a very subjective, personal opinion that we cannot quantify. All we can say is that you think he looks better now. And if you happen to think he looks better, then you're right, because your opinion of what's beautiful or aesthetic or looks good is your opinion, and your opinion is therefore always right. Okay? Fair enough. You're entitled to that opinion. But that's subjective. That's just your opinion. Maybe some women think that powerlifters look better than bodybuilders. Maybe they find that sexier. Right? Maybe a lot of dudes find bodybuilders more attractive, but maybe more women find powerlifters more attractive. I don't know. I mean, how do we quantify this? So, over to the point, he also uses different diet, different enhancement, right? He uses different stuff. And let's talk about the whole thing of the whole aesthetics thing. The guy basically admits to using pretty significant amounts of Primo year-round, most of the year at least, year-round, for years and years on end. I mean, Primo is considered to be one of the best aesthetics-enhancing substances known to man. Is that a factor? I mean, the fact that he's been using Primo all these years, the guy is obviously not bottom-of-the-bucket genetics. I mean, let's throw that factor in, too. You have a guy like Greg who, he's obviously not average genetics. Let's be realistic here. You don't go to the world level in powerlifting and win a pro card in bodybuilding with average genetics. Okay, the guy is obviously gifted. Okay, and I don't think anyone can really argue against that point. If you think that people with just average normal genetics for strength and aesthetics and everything else go to the world level in powerlifting and earn a pro card in bodybuilding both in the same lifetime, you're not living in the real world. The guy is gifted. Many years of anabolic use. And then we come over to the other point, years and years of Primo use. As a genetically gifted lifter who already built an enormous, insane strength base as a power lifter, then talks about how to look good as a bodybuilder. Okay, but that personal bias is going to be slightly skewed, right? His journey is going to be different from your journey on that stuff, right? A lot of you guys may not have those advantages, so what's working for him may not work for you. I'm not saying it won't. I'm not saying it will. I'm saying it might not. You have to factor that in. We just have to look at the weight of the evidence. Because you know what? What he's done might actually work for you. It very well might. But we don't know that it will. We have a lot of those factors involved. Let's come over to the point. Tries to say bodybuilding is harder than powerlifting. No, not necessarily. Again, how do you quantify that? I'm going to say, let's come over. Maybe it depends on the powerlifter and it depends on the bodybuilder as to how hard each one works. You know what? I think that's a very individual thing. We could argue that there are professional bodybuilders who we see who are insanely lazy, and they exist. We've seen them who go to the Olympia, and there's guys who really bust their butt and work really, really, really hard. There's both types. Come over to powerlifting, same thing. We do see some lazy type powerlifters, and we see some powerlifters who train insanely hard at the world level. It varies. What I will state, though, I'm just going to give my subjective opinion, is something that came up the other day. And it was actually based on Greg's thing of Greg talking about having a maintenance of 3,000 calories. I can't even envision a 200 plus pound man who lifts and does cardio, who trains hard, having a 3,000 calorie maintenance. And that's one of the things, again, I was chatting with an expert about that in private just the other day. And he had said, well, in his own experience, bodybuilders tend to be a little lazy when they're outside of the gym. They tend to not be active. A lot of strength athletes have higher NEATs, because they tend to be more active oftentimes. And there are exceptions. I'm not talking about the really morbidly obese fat guy. A lot of powerlifters, and just like a lot of other athletes, oftentimes have higher energy turnovers at the same body weight. It's due to higher physical activity, right? And bodybuilders tend to cut down a lot. They cut down excessively low, use cutting substances. What happens? Lowers your NEAT, lowers your activity, not your metabolic rate, your base rate, but your overall activity to compensate, and they never come up, and they tend to be lazier if they don't force themselves to do stuff. All right, that is a factor there. It's a reason you usually see most bodybuilders, even at the same body weight, oftentimes burn less calories on average throughout the week and have lower maintenance than a lot of strength athletes. They're just less active. They're lazier as a result. They're lazier as a result of all the cutting they've done. It makes them inherently more lazy. And I mean, we come over the point with Greg. I mean, if he's training that hard, I don't see his training. I don't know how he trains these days. But he trains, claims to train hard, and claims to do tons of bike riding. Weighs over 200 pounds, has a 3,000 calorie maintenance. I'm struggling with that. That would be shocking for me to drop that low, to have that low of a maintenance calories. That would definitely be cutting for me. I have clients who weigh under 200 pounds whose maintenance calories are higher than 3,000. I have clients who burn more than that, who weigh like 180. I got a client who burns more than that, who weighs 165 pounds. That's really low. So you've got to question what's going on there. Let's come over to the other point. He talks about size and not equaling strength. Uses the example of Olympic lifters who are a technique-oriented sport. They're maximizing strength, but they're also generally very short, very lean, and therefore they get good strength to weight ratios combined with high technique sport. It's not the same thing. Because what does the research say? Let's set all that nonsense aside. What does every study that's ever looked at size and strength ratios determine? Muscle mass is the largest component in maximum strength. Let me state that again. Muscle mass relative to your height, that's what they measure, that's what they found the two variables are, is the largest factor in your overall 1 rep max strength on simple lifts like the squat. Not the clean and jerk, the power clean, these very technical explosive lifts, but lifts that just measure brute strength. You know what measures brute strength? The squat and the bench press. They measure brute strength real effectively. Okay? The amount of muscle tissue on your body relative to your height, the length of your frame. That also affects the length of your arms and legs. Okay? That's a big factor. And even Greg met that paradigm. He is well below average height, and even as a power lifter, he was incredibly jacked and quite lean. He had a ridiculous amount of muscle tissue relative to his height. Therefore, he had phenomenal world-class level lifts. Okay? he actually meets the model of what we know based upon the research, even for drug-free people. Because that research is on people not on gear. Perspective. He gave an anecdote that doesn't work. Why didn't he use himself as an anecdote? His actual own personal anecdote fits the research on size and strength. And what is it that we always say for powerlifting? Who usually wins any given weight class? The shortest, leanest guy tends to win. The majority of the time. There are exceptions, but that gives them one heck of an advantage. He fits that exact description. Extreme amount of muscle mass, had generally very low body fat relative to his height, usually the shortest guy in his class. Okay? And he kicked butt. The Olympic lifting falls into the same category on that. They have weight classes there for a reason. They're really high classes. The shortest, leanest person tends to dominate in any given weight class. It's a strength sport. That's the way it is. We know that. So you have all of that. Then he said stuff like, well, let's talk about easy versus hard. I mean, on a leg press, if you go really slow, it's way harder. It's like, who cares how hard it is? Let's talk about what's effective. Let's talk about what's effective. When studies look at things like how fast you move a weight, we know moving a weight faster causes more muscle fiber recruitment. We know it does. I'm not saying there aren't some benefits in some cases to going slow, but generally speaking, studies find you recruit more muscle fibers when you lift explosively with the same form. Meaning if good form is utilized. I don't mean by cheating it up, I mean with good form, the faster you move the weight explosively, the more muscle fibers you're recruited in study after study after study. Also makes you grow faster. Come over to the point of rep ranges. Let's set aside his anecdote because his anecdote is going to be biased. There's a lot of other factors. What does every single study in the modern world now that's looked at rep ranges in hypertrophy found? That rep range isn't a particularly important factor. Things like relative workload, training volume, all of those things are a factor. All those things are a factor. And we come over to the next point, people are going to talk about, well, how the power lifters train, and they'll probably use me as an example and go, well, you're a power lifter and Greg looks better than you, and okay. I can assure you Greg's probably got, number one, better genetics than me, right? Let's be realistic. Number two, probably I can assure you beyond a shadow of a doubt, he has put way, way, way more substances in his body in his lifetime than I ever have. All right? Wouldn't you expect him to look better? Doesn't mean anything in this case. It means he's got better genetics with a lot of gear use. Okay? Well, I would expect him to look good then. I mean, realistically, right? Wouldn't you? I would hope so. When you got great genetics and you abuse gear for 20 years, hopefully you do have a pretty impressive physique. Hopefully you've got a world-class level physique at that point, which he does. Doesn't prove that point. Furthermore, I do more high reps than I do singles. Right? As a power lifter, just like most power lifters, I train more than one rep range. Right? Don't I? You guys watch it. But let's come over to the other point. What's the evidence show? People can get maximum hypertrophy off 3 rep sets if they want. They can get maximum hypertrophy off 10 rep sets. They can get maximum hypertrophy off 15 rep sets. We found in studies that when we start equating volume and workload and recovery, all these rep ranges have the same total potential at the end of the week for maximizing muscle growth. That's what the research says. He's saying, oh, only one works best. This is what I believe. Only this works. But then we go look at it when it's studied in a lab, and yeah, what he's doing works, okay? So does this, and so does this, and so does this. They all work. They all work really well when used correctly. So it's ludicrous to jump up and say because I've done something and got great results doing it means that it's the only way that works. When you look at the evidence and the research, it says, yeah, his way does work. It can work maximally. It can produce max results. But so can this, and this also. So to then say one of those four is the best is just ludicrous. Based on your anecdote? I don't know, guys. That's just my take on it. That's ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. And the fact that he's gotten great results doesn't prove that this is better. Just like to make a statement like bodybuilding is harder than powerlifting, or the other direction. If I were to say powerlifting is harder than bodybuilding, based on all the data we have, that's subjective, depends on the individual, and is purely opinion and speculative at best. And it's just speculation. You know what? I'm not even going to state an opinion. But what I will state is that generally speaking, in just my own anecdote, my observation, most strength athletes burn more calories in an average week than most bodybuilders I've met of similar body weights. So who's working harder? Who is working harder on a weekly basis? All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.